Hamitakiapi Lampetu Washte. Welcome to the ICT Newscast. I'm Shirley Sneve. Marvel's new movie is in theaters now, and as fans gear up for another epic adventure, we're taking a look back at a project where language stole the show. This is the Avengers in Lakota.
Start!
One of the questions we sat with is how can we make the language as appealing as we can for our students, because we could talk to them, and we have talked to them about how important our language is, the philosophy behind our language, the beauty in our language. But at the end of the day, they're kids. They're interested in all kinds of various things that kids are interested in. My daughter's into TikTok reel, or YouTube reels, TikTok. She sends me memes and different things like that. But one thing that we kind of noticed around Halloween time is that the kids, about 75-80% of them, when we're handing out candy or when we have stuff at the school, they're all dressed as Avengers. And then another thing that the elders always tell us is that language starts in the home. So how can we get language into our kids' homes, into the community's homes, and how can we do it in a way that's really appealing? What if we dubbed the Avengers into Lakota? And Chuck said that he could ask Mark. Mark, he came to Standing Rock during the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. And so he had gotten to know Sister Jody here and brother Chuck. So Chuck reached out to Mark, and Mark started working on it. And then we didn't think anything of it for a couple months. Out of the blue, we're on this meeting with all these execs, and we're looking at all these people, and we didn't prepare anything, we didn't prep anything, and then they kind of swung it to us and say, kind of, what are you guys doing here? And then we just explained and talked about what we wanted to do, and how we had wanted to dub the Avengers into Lakota. They gave us the approval, and that's kind of what we were looking for, and that's kind of where we thought it would end, is that they would just give us the approval and we would figure this out on our own. But what ended up happening is Marvel and another studio called Deluxe, they helped us through this whole process. And so we just started translating with the elders. They would think of words like spectrometers, helicarrier, tesseract, radiation, different things that we may not say every day.
The casting part was one of the more funner parts. We went down to Thunder Valley. We got to speak with a school down there, a bunch of kids, and they spoke nothing but Lakota, and it was real cool. They sang with us, they hung out with us throughout the day, and then we had casting calls up here, and people came from all over the place. And I remember we had one at the casting call out of Powwow in Fort Yates here, and people were coming up from college, from Haskell, or from Shadron, Nebraska, and they just all wanted to be part of this. And so even if they didn't make it, they wanted to be able to say, hey, I tried out for that.
When Ray called and said, get over here, we need somebody for Iron Man, I was like, holy smokes, like, I'll do it. Like, it was like unreal. And getting to Zoom with Robert Downey Jr. and have him say my name, it was just like, whoa, it gave me chills. Teaching K-12, college level, beginner to more advanced, like, you got to get into it, like, you got to teach them, and you got to be exciting, you got to get the attention. But doing the dub is different than that, because you're sitting at a screen, you're looking at the mouth, and you're trying to say it as fast as you can, but also trying to keep the language in there. And the first 2 hours, I think, Lars was like, quit being humble, be more confident, like, without like Chuck and Lars and Ray sitting in the other side of the booth, they helped a lot to get into character. Like, you really had to be Robert Downey Jr. and how confident he is, how cocky he is, and and it was awesome experience.
By using a platform like Disney, it's going to not just be in Lakota homes, but in thousands and possibly millions of homes. And just having the language spoken in and of itself is a huge victory. I think the hopes for this project, and I think the reason that Disney was so interested in it was because of Prey, and they had used the Comanche language in a large part of the script there. And I think people just forget that there are other worldviews, other languages that predate English. So the Indigenous languages are some of the most underfunded places that philanthropy or the government have invested in, but they took a lot of money to take them away from us. The government spent millions and billions of dollars to take our languages from us. And we want to have projects that are positively spinning out of that kind of dark times. It's also the cornerstone of tribal sovereignty. So in this context, we do need to have an understanding that without our languages, without that worldview, without the deep, place-based knowledge, we are going to slowly become something that is not recognizable to our ancestors. And the language is the biggest key next to land.
Being the little res kids that we are, we're like, we're finding out more and more like how big this is and how big it's gonna be. And so I was like, holy cow. So when you just said that, like, it's hard to get on streaming, that blew my mind again, like because we're very fortunate and very lucky to be able to be part of this project and to have all these opportunities. And I truly believe it's the language that's paving the way. And so that's awesome.
Arave tuat tavai, which is Ute for today is a good day. Arave is today, tuat is good, and tavai is day. Arave tuat tavai, which is Ute for today is a good day.
We all know the name Pocahontas, but few of us know her real story. Our friends at PBS take a deeper look at her life and connection to today's MMIP crisis.
This is a People's History of Native America with me, Ty LeClaire. And today, we're going to talk about the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Crisis, or MMIP. The MMIP crisis and movement is raising awareness to the alarmingly high rates of murders and missing cases of Native women. In America, homicide is the third leading cause of death amongst Native girls and women aged 1 to 44. And more than half of Indigenous women experience sexual violence. Even though Native Americans are only 2.5% of the US population, Native women are 10 times more likely to be murdered than any other ethnicity. But did you know it all began with the cartoon most of us grew up watching? Pocahontas. Yeah, that's right, the Disney cartoon. As a kid, I always loved Disney's Pocahontas because it was the only representation we had on TV. It was so popular, I too thought I could talk to trees and animals.
But I know every rock and tree and creature has a life.
But the only true thing about this movie is this.
These white men are dangerous.
Disney claimed that Pocahontas was its first animated film inspired by a real-life figure. And while Pocahontas did exist, her real story has more to do with the MMIP crisis than falling in love with a settler. In fact, Disney's attempt to create a cartoon princess about people getting along together is more destructive to the Indigenous narrative, especially once you know that Pocahontas was actually kidnapped, raped, and murdered. Pocahontas' tribe was the Pamunkey, located in present-day Virginia. Her real name was Eminent, but once colonization hit, she became the first case of the MMIP crisis, an epidemic that is plaguing almost every Indigenous community on the continent. Unlike Disney's love story, the real tale of Pocahontas and John Smith is defined by cruelty at the hands of not only Smith, but his entire merry troop of settlers. In Disney, there was only one John, but in reality, there were two Johns. After enduring years of captivity under Smith, Pocahontas was forcibly wed to the other John Rolfe. She was captured for the purpose of sexual and economic exploitation, later having a son with Rolfe. When her and Rolfe made it to England, she was poisoned at the age of 22. She never made it home, and her body remains in Europe, while her descendants still live in Virginia to this day. What Pocahontas' story tells us is that the MMIP crisis back then and today is a direct result of the colonization of the Americas. Wait, but why am I explaining a woman's experience? Am I mansplaining? What I need to do is find a Native woman expert. Are there any around? Aha, of course there are. I just found one on Google. That was easy. The part that I hate the most about this gig, emailing those with a PhD. Dear Christina, I may not be a woman, wait, no, okay. Although I'm a man who needs a woman, definitely no. I'm looking for someone that can help me fill the gaps in my knowledge about the MMIP crisis. What do I know about the current MMIP crisis?
When we cover a protest, you'll always see a group of women carrying missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls signs.
Homicide is the third leading cause of death for American Indian girls.
Dear Christina,
the tragic violence that Indigenous women and girls have experienced amounts to genocide.
I'm researching the MMIP crisis.
Even though MMIW is a movement that was started in Canada, women in Indian country have been going missing for a long time.
Being a Native person from the land now called Canada myself,
Thousands and thousands of women turning up missing or murdered every year.
this ongoing tragedy is extremely close to my heart.
American Indian women are 10 times more likely to be murdered.
I want to make sure that the information I present is accurate.
This is absolutely genocidal.
Our women have been going missing since 1492.
Dear Ty, sure, call me whenever. Here we go. Hey, Christina.
Hey, Ty.
What are some of the factors that are leading to the disappearance and death on Indian reservations?
Precedent was set 500 years ago with Pocahontas, that if you rape, murder, kill an Indigenous woman, then you're going to get away with it. And it may even make you a hero throughout history for doing that. In 1978, the Supreme Court decided a case called Oliphant versus Suquamish. And the Supreme Court ruled that non-Indians cannot be prosecuted on tribal lands. So that gives a license to anyone who is not Native and consider Native women expendable because they know they're not going to get caught. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to say that we are only ever victims, right? We are still here. It amazes me that we are still here in the face of all of this.
What has been done to solve this problem?
So we are taking steps to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore, but we also need our sovereignty to be strengthened. Tribes have been able to get grants through the Violence Against Women Act to create our own programs. Things that we know will help our own people, because all tribes are very different and what's happening in different reservations are different, and a lot of tribes don't have reservations.
Why has this issue been underreported for so long?
So I did a study on how federal recognition in tribes is portrayed in the media. And in 40 years, there were only 4,000 stories of federal recognition. And actually, there are only 20 stories in 40 years in broadcast news. And so when people don't hear these stories, they don't know about them. And so it's so much easier to perpetuate the stereotypes. And then the stories that do come out are the same stories. They're about poverty, about drunkenness, about welfare, and it doesn't give the depth of what's happening in Indian country. And so it's really easy to miss a story about missing and murdered Indigenous people because people just don't know outside. And unless the outside knows, then it's really hard for us to change anything because then people don't believe us.
Thank you, Christina. Tragically today, there are thousands of stories like Pocahontas out there. Indigenous women who have been ripped from their homes and from those who love them and need them. Many Native women today have to navigate the justice system between 4 distinct jurisdictions: tribal, municipal, state, and federal. The numbers further expose this tragedy. 4 out of 5 Native American women experience violence. 1 out of 3 will be raped. 86% of these rapes are by non-Native men. So when Disney marketed Pocahontas as a love story based on real events and released the film to mark her 400th birthday, it capitalized off a tragic story that completely ignored the reality of a courageous Native woman who suffered way too cruel a fate. One of the most powerful things taken away from Pocahontas was her agency, and a distorted version of her legacy lives on. Although we can never give a voice back to all the MMIP out there, we can change how society values Native American women. That evolution can only begin with the telling of the real story of Pocahontas, the most famous missing Native American woman in history.
It's become a new thing for us to control our own image. It's about representing ourselves the way we see ourselves.
What we build is grounded in our song, it's our language, our ceremonies.
We're engineers, we're doctors. We are doing things to make a difference in this world.
Our legacy will continue.
When people build with a purpose, opportunity grows. The Lower Sioux Nation is turning hemp into homes, creating jobs, protecting the earth, and investing in our future. It's one of the oldest buildings on the Lower Sioux Indian community in Minnesota, but it's getting a remodel in a new, old way, natural insulation. Danny Desjardins manages the Hempcrete project for the tribe.
When we got here to do the retrofit, we found a lot of black mold, basically removed all of that, and now have replaced it all with hempcrete.
The project uses a combination of traditional construction with the Hempcrete providing a superior insulation building for outside walls.
Still have to frame the house up how you would normally frame up a house, but then the hempcrete just replaces all of that. And then there's no cavity in your wall either, so it's basically just filled with hempcrete, and so it's one monolithic piece of insulation. Whereas when you have layers in there, then that's how you can create condensation, and there's different, then even the cavities creates places for pests and mold to grow and things like that.
It provides the opportunity to build healthier homes for Indian country with the benefits of being mold resistant, fire resistant, as well as rodent resistant. So healthier homes that have more sustainability.
Historically, tribes used all the parts of the buffalo. Mary Jane Oatman of the Indigenous Cannabis Association compares that with the hemp plant.
That's why we have very much leaned into the project that is happening at the Lower Sioux Indian community, and that the work that they're doing to really showcase the hemp plant as the new green buffalo, with the ability to be able to provide so many aspects of life ways for our tribal families, from food systems with hemp, medicine, shelter, and clothing. There are just so many opportunities for whole plant use.
Hemp and marijuana are the same plant.
We always try and say industrial hemp, just so it kind of adds that, little industrial factor to it, and then gets people asking questions about it. We still always get those questions. Can you smoke it, or can it get me high, or whatever, and what we like to tell people, because we go talk with 4th graders, we talk with, seniors in high school, and we tell them it's just like how the dogs have a Great Dane and a Chihuahua. They couldn't be more opposite, but they're still both dogs. Same with hemp and marijuana or weed or whatever you want to call it. They're both a cannabis plant, but they couldn't be more opposite. Industrial hemp is over here. Industrial hemp is the sober, straight shooter, and then weed is the cousin, whatever. The hemp stem, that's basically what's all rolled up into these big bales out front here. and it has to lay out in the field for a while before you want to bale it up, and it's retting, and so it's basically a fancy word for rotting. And what it's doing, it's breaking down the natural glues that are inside of the plant, and you can then separate it a lot easier. This fiber is your bast fiber. That's like what your textiles, your clothes, like my jacket's made out of the outside of a hemp stem. And that's historically what people would process for, is this outside of the stem, you know, and to get the fiber and create textiles out of. And then the inside of the stem was just the byproduct. The inside of the stem is what we're going for. That's the building material.
While Lower Sioux has invested in hemp as a building material, processing for fiber and food is a challenge.
The United States is in a significant backlog in being able to provide not just the manufacturing infrastructure for the fibers and to be able to create sustainable fabrics. We're in competition right now with the cheaper, faster, quicker production of other materials. And it's really also that break, the prohibition timeline when we did not have the processing here domestically in the United States. But that's not just for fiber, Shirley. That is for so many other aspects of the plant. We currently lack domestic processing for the grain to make the hemp hearts. Affordability is going to be a challenge until we can start to get our tribal hub zones and our tribal foreign trade zones really activated around creating new manufacturing opportunities for the whole plant uses here domestically in the United States. And we really see Indian country is positioned to lead in that manner because of our large agricultural base, our strong water rights, as well as just being able to push forward the ethos of regenerative farming, which comes hand in hand with the hemp plant.
I came into this kind of a skeptic, started using the material, seeing how easy it was, and seeing people around me get jobs around it, you know, seeing houses being developed here on our reservation by our own community members, for our community members. You know, it's became more of a why now than a job. You know, it's like that's my whole reason for coming to work every day is to, you know, we're rebuilding our community with our community members.
In October, the Lower Sioux will be the first U.S. host of the International Hemp Building Symposium. For ICT, from the homelands of the Mdewakanton Dakota, I'm Shirley Sneve. The Fort Peck Tribes are bringing the buffalo back to tribal lands nationwide, sharing culture, food, and healing with dozens of community. Our partners at the University of Montana have this story.
Montana Fish and Wildlife Director Robert Magnan is working to build the buffalo herd on the Fort Peck Reservation. Buffalo were first brought from Yellowstone to the Fort Peck Ranch in 2012.
We're working with Yellowstone National Park on a project called the Buffalo Transfer Program. And what we're trying to do is get buffalo out of Yellowstone National Park into tribes around the United States.
The buffalo are quarantined for 2 years in Yellowstone National Park and 1 year at the Buffalo Ranch in Fort Peck to watch for brucellosis. If deemed brucellosis-free, Fort Peck will add buffalo to their herd and distribute some to different tribes across the United States. Fort Peck has transferred around 450 buffalo to other tribes.
This program has become very successful. So for the last 8 years that we've been doing this, we've been able to give to 26 different tribes in 14 states.
Students at Poplar Middle School, which is located on the Fort Peck Reservation, get to connect deeply with the buffalo. Educator Joseph Hammer says the Buffalo Unity Project teaches students about the buffalo and their history.
The work that Robbie's done and the tribes have done brings back so many other things to these students, and it allows them to learn about their culture and to get better in tune with their culture and the way they used to live, and they are learning to live a better way because of these buffalo.
Fort Peck currently has a total of 750 buffalo. The buffalo also provide a food source for the community. Montana State Senator Shane Morgeau sits on the Fish and Game and Natural Resources committees. He says buffalo represent many things to tribal people.
To me, resetting and bringing bison home is, it just has so many roles, right? It's like cultural, it's this food sovereignty and subsistence for long term. It's ensuring that, you protect language and culture, and you're kind of pulling this all together, and you're protecting your people. We're protecting our people and bringing them home.
Fort Peck hopes to keep growing its herds so the tribe can continue providing for the community and Indigenous communities all over the United States. Reporting from the homelands of the Salish, Calypse, and Kasanka people, I'm Jarek Olson reporting from the School of Journalism at the University of Montana.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.